Death is inevitable. This is a known fact. But, with advances in science and man's power over nature, is death relative? Find out in and enter the archives.
I'd like to start it off by saying a little something about myself. My name is Clarissa Allen. I work security for Verdak Industries. I'm about 5'8", white, blonde hair, blue eyes. My genes are the only thing left of my family, though I'd rather not go into that. My former employer, Verdak Industries, was very strict. They did not accept failure, nor did they like their people stepping out of line. I'd say it's rather eerie how clearly the supervisors abused their status over inferiors. Myself and everyone else employed by Verdak were pawns in plans of the department heads. Hell, the only reason I worked there was for the good insurance package. Another thing Verdak required was signing confidentiality waivers. Nothing regarding this facility, its assets, and any of our associations could be communicated in any way. But I was a cop. My job, report the facts and keep people safe. I'd been a cop for 3 years then, so I was young in comparison to other cops. But I'd had my fair share of experiences. I had a rough start. Got shot by a bullet that put me out of commission for a few weeks. I can't move my left arm above my shoulder anymore. But the mandated physical therapy helped me gain back most movement. This was before Verdak came into my life. What was the purpose of Verdak Industries? They've dabbled in all different fields of experimentation. The latest project they worked on was called Project 707, codename Animate. Most of the projects and experiments they performed, I knew the general ideas. But, of course, with confidentiality being key, they spared me the details. I already knew they had worked with electromagnetic radiation, thermal heat, acidic emulsions, and produced a new serum called 7S17. Over the intercom, the science division head could be heard saying, "Project 707 will change the world. We can have the greatest minds working with us. We can fix everything. We can shape up the world. To better the world." That was their goal. But this was before. It was a few months ago, now. My job was to oversee the scientific projects that go on. I had to monitor the scientists and all of the people involved for potential threats. Simple security gig. But when Verdak announced they were nearing the end of the latest phase of Project 707, my job felt anything but simple. My radio had sounded off suddenly late in my shift. Over it I heard, "Claire, get your ass down to room 108. We need you there ASAP." So I hurried. I thought it was an emergency. Once I got to the appropriate wing, I walked through the hall's archway, only to realize the darning fact that it was deserted. Why weren't other staff members present? I hadn't a clue. Confused, I pressed on, opening the door at the end of the long, dark hallway. Room 108. I peered in and quickly noticed a pile of electrical cords running across the floor. Walking in, I came upon a medical table illuminated by a singular light bulb dangling from the center of the room. The medical table held various tools, reflecting the light that emphasized their sharpness. The only tool I could recognize was a scalpel. And was that blood? Dark and red, almost rust-looking. Yes, it was dried blood. But where did it come from? I hadn't seen the source yet. I needed to know, though. I was called there. There was someone who needed me. I hadn't noticed immediately in the dimly lit room, but against the tiled wall, opposite me, were big metal containers. deceptively plain-looking, like shipping crates. But one was sealed by a massive bolted chain lock that you'd usually need a crowbar to pry open. This interested me. I jimmied a lockpick out of some of the medical tools, and as I was about to give up, I heard it click. The metal case opened and unfolded itself, revealing a large glass vat filled with blood and something else. Something fleshy. Something familiar. Almost definitely human, but I would have to drain the jar of blood first. Ugh, disgusting. I worked security. I'd never seen so much gory action. I hadn't become desensitized to the stuff. Although, I did have first-hand experience. Getting shot and all. Suppressing my discomfort, I took my gun out of its holster and shattered the glass. Blood seeped out of it, pooling on the floor with an array of meat. Brains. Sticking out of one of them was a cassette. I retrieved it, feeling nauseated. The blood had found an escape through a drain in the floor. A slow trickling sound could be heard as it fell. Drip. 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 While I examined the cassette, I heard another click from the containers and a small hum emitting from somewhere amongst the metal containers. "Hello, Clarissa," said an ominous and gray voice. "Thank you for coming. Verdak Industries is pleased with you. A considerable bonus could be in your future, if you uphold our confidence." I looked at the containers quizzically. Where was this voice coming from? The voice then spoke again. "However, I have one favor. Head to floor 11. There, you'll find another secret." "Curious, aren't you?" the voice questioned. Its tone chilled me to my bones. "Cash, if I'm silent?" "I could certainly use the money." Decidedly, I grabbed the cassette and left the tiled room, calling a code in my radio for the cleanup crew. It was almost the end of my shift at Verdak, so the investigation of the next location would have to wait. When I arrived home, I made my way upstairs, into my not-so-luxurious apartment, and laid in bed, and reassured myself, tomorrow will be different. I closed my eyes. I am asleep. I'm not awake. I'm dreaming. All of these were the things I had hoped while I waited. No, prayed for sleep. But it never came. Floor 11. I was not able to shut my mind up. Thoughts tugged at my consciousness, begging to go. Floor 11. Floor 11. Every time I felt close to sleep, that strange, grave, ominous voice pulled me to the unknown. What was Verdak doing? Who was responsible for the blood and brains of room 108? I had to know. I needed to know. It was nearly 3 a.m. I couldn't resist it any longer. I drove tiredly, keeping the music on blast to keep me awake. Each bump in the road making my eyes stay wide and awake. I was alert, and yet so very tired. I was compelled to get answers. This need prepared me to be surprised, scared even. Arriving at the building, I used my security keys to slip inside. Verdak Industries, where science and progress supposedly led to all man's happiness. It hadn't occurred to me before, but what room on floor 11? What door was I supposed to open? I'd never been in that area of the facilities before. As I nearly collapsed through the door to the floor 11 from the stairwell, I saw a bright white light radiating through a glass-walled laboratory room. "Hello, Clarissa." A voice came from the light, which was coming from a lab projector. "Curiosity killed the cat, Clarissa? What you'll find in here is something breathtaking, embodying our goal to change the world. With Project 707, we have achieved just that. We only needed volunteers." I was confused and unsure of what I was hearing. A volunteer? No one but the people involved, those who signed safety waivers, could volunteer. I had only signed a confidentiality waiver. But the scientists, what did they get themselves into? Had they unknowingly volunteered themselves? I knew Verdak wasn't the most trustworthy and reputable place, but they wouldn't. Would they? The disembodied and ominous voice began to chuckle. A dark and sinister chuckle. Let's see what's behind door number 1. The projector's light shifted, and I instinctively put my hand on my belt, hovering my gun, ready for anything. But not what I saw. I knew him, the scientist known as Kovac. His eyes were rolled into the back of his head. He couldn't be conscious. Was he dead? He was standing on his own. How was that possible? A stranger appeared, coming into sight from the corner of the room. Are you watching, officer? This is Project 707. He smiled, his grin devious and menacing. He was tall, about 6'4", black hair, green eyes, white. He grabbed a needle from the nearby medical table and pressed the plunger. A green, bubbly fluid could be seen dripping from its tip and within the chamber. Now, this is serum 7S17. To administer it properly, you must first remove what provides us our humanity. Walking towards the center of the room, he pushed Kovac so that he bowed his head. What I saw filled me with shock and anger, and it frightened me. His eyes were not just rolled into the back of his head, as I thought. He had no iris or pupil or anything. His eyes were a blank void. Worse still, his cranium had been removed, and inside was empty. A bony shell for what used to hold what I assumed was now cleaned up from room 108. We took a little off the top, made a meaty preserve vat. His now familiar chuckle made my blood boil. So I convinced you to come here. I must say I am disappointed. It was all too easy. A little anticlimactic. At least now the fun begins. The man used his left hand to plunge the needle into the scientist's temple, the serum entering the dead man's lifeless face. I watched Kovac become lifeless no more. My instincts were no longer working. I could only watch, frozen. Color returned to Kovac's face. He came back to life. And he stood up, stared at me through the darkness behind the projector. His eye voids glowing green and penetrating deep into my soul. And he spoke. Hail Verdak! Hail Verdak! The stranger looked pleased, smiling as a child who won a spelling bee would. It was sickening. He then began walking out, throwing the needle away in a waste bin. Mass production starts tomorrow, and will continue as long as I'm around to oversee it. Oversee? Did that mean he was the project head? Or maybe someone even more important? Verdak himself. Snapping back to reality, I knew what I had to do. What needed to be done. I couldn't allow it to happen. I couldn't let it be mass-produced. Kovac was dead. The real Kovac. As well as all the other test subject scientists, I assumed. I thought back to my training. It was my duty to protect the innocent. I unholstered my gun. And I aimed. My index finger pulling the trigger twice, both bullets reaching their target. It was my duty. I had no choice. He bled out on the floor, unable to leave the place his hellish creation. only his blood escaping through a drain in the tiled floor. Drip, drip, drip. Trickle, trickle, trickle. I went over to the thing that was once Kovac. He stood there, repeating, "Hail Verdak," over and over again. He wasn't alive anymore. Not really human. He had no thoughts or feelings of his own, only implanted ones. He may have been innocent, just a victim, but regardless, I couldn't allow any of Verdak's creations to remain. I pulled the trigger. Out of respect for the scientist I knew, I waited. I waited with Kovac's body until morning. Until they put 2 and 2 together. I am currently serving a prison sentence. Double homicide. They suspect that I was having a bad trip from some mystery drug that had been in a syringe found nearby. But I know my actions were justified. Mindless people who are nothing but slaves to an industry that twists hope and change for humanity. Yeah, I can sit in prison to prevent that. Hell, at least I don't have to worry about money and insurance packages.
He threw it all away. He gambled till his dying day. But I remember when and how it all began. Dreams were made of yesteryears. The love we made was loud and clear. But I remember when and how it all began. Dream a dream, a dream, a dream away. Chanting words incessantly, he danced upon fortuity. But I remember then who and where and when. Lady Luck, she left his side, a Puritan of whim's demise. But I remember then who and where and when. I dream, I dream, I dream, I dream away. To slash the mashed potato minds, their sins are seen, we'll all go blind. To try and make the unseen seen, the lame to walk, the dead to breathe. Try and make the seeing blind, the walking lame, the living die, the insane savior of this world. You kill yourself for what you've heard.
What you just heard is a story. A story about corruption. A story about murder. A story about a freak of science and nature, not tested or true. A story about the unfortunate events of trying to get rid of a human epidemic. Death. But never fear. We are all equal in the eyes of the Reaper. And although our disposition for death is fear, perhaps that is the wrong way to think about it. Who knows? Death may only be the beginning and the end in the archives.